Hey, happy Monday, guys. Welcome to the Wild Carrot Farmstead's pharmacy class with an F. It is June 24th, which is John the Baptist's birthday, and also where St. John's wort gets its name. It is often found blooming in full bloom on June 24th or around that time. So let's get some of this harvested and I'll meet you back in our kitchen. I like to harvest it about halfway up so we get the leaves and the flowers. We always leave some back for the pollinators. My favorite time to harvest St. John's wort is when it is in as full bloom as you can find it during the daytime when the sun is shining. All right, I had a shower. That's a great tip for trying to maintain no ticks. I had a fresh change of clothes, and now we're back in the kitchen and in the apothecary area of our kitchen where I tend to craft all of our medicinal remedies and skincare. Most of us probably know St. John's wort as an herb often found in pill form to remedy or help with symptoms of depression. It is true, it is a natural uplifting herb that helps combat symptoms of depression. It is true. However, I craft skincare, though I do love herbs for internal use and do teach about internal usages of herbs. Today we're focusing on the external part of the body that still needs love and care. And it is true, we still even absorb nutrients and benefits on our skin, through our skin, into our system. So what we're putting on our skin is equally as important as what we're putting in our body. Topically, we often will use St. John's wort in skincare because it's an antiviral, an antimicrobial, an antibacterial, and an anti-inflammatory herb. What does that mean? That means it's wonderful for skincare to help heal up wounds, to help soothe rashes and speed up the healing process. Since it is anti-inflammatory as well, it's great for the face to get rid of some of the inflammation there and in the hands and feet, for example. And it also is a great aid in lymphatic draining those areas and really moving that lymph and inflammation out of those zones. And let's not forget, St. John's wort has powerful antiseptic properties which go hand in hand with skin healing remedies. So I set out before us so you can see it all, dried St. John's wort, infused St. John's wort oils, fresh St. John's wort, and I thought we would infuse a St. John's wort oil because if you haven't heard me teach this before, the foundation of Herbal, intentionally crafted, small batch, healthy skincare often starts in our home as an infused oil. So I need to teach you step one to get the healthy benefits of the St. John's wort onto your skin via infusion. So let's quickly cover again from our previous pharmacy classes infusions. There are several ways to achieve an herbal oil infusion. The first way is the traditional way, which is the way I like. I love get it into a jar, put either oil on it, or if you're doing tincture, alcohol on it, put it on the shelf. Make sure it's dark and cool and forget about it for 4 to 6 weeks. That's an excellent way to process a lot of herb. And if you have time and are working within the rhythm of nature naturally, that is a no problem way to do it. And all we have is time with slow, intentional living. And it's okay because if you're thinking about it, you've already have tinctures and infusions on your apothecary shelf from last year's harvest and forage put up so you can get that out and use it now while your new harvest is getting ready to start the cycle again with being infused. So think of it as a year-long 4-quarter cycle. You know, fall, winter, spring, summer. That's how we, us herbalists who work off the land, work. Another way to make an infusion if you are impatient is you can put it on a double broiler, put a pot of water, get it boiling gently, get a mason jar, put your carrier oil of choice in it along with your herbs, St. John's wort today, for example, and cook it low and slow for a couple hours where the medicinal properties in the plant can leach out into the oil from the heat, aiding and speeding up that process. Personally, I think a long, slow infusion draws out more medicine from the plant. I can also do it way longer than 4 to 6 weeks. We can infuse for a long time if stored properly. So that is up to you if you want to kind of push it along or let it wait. Another advantage to doing it the traditional style where we're waiting is that you're not using utilities, electricity, any kind of energy that way. Another way to infuse your oils is almost like the double broiler method. It is a quicker process that is using solar infusions, and solar means sun. So it's like a sun tea, only herbs and oils. You put your herb and oil into a mason jar, for example, sterilized first, and set it out in the sun all day, where again the heat will activate that process and speed it up and get your plant medicine leached out into your carrier oil. And hey man, there's even machines that do it. That Levo or Levo, you know, it might be used for other things, but yes, you can use it for good old-fashioned innocent herbs as well in creating infusions. That's just a little machine that's almost like a coffee pot, but that uses oils and herbs instead of water and coffee, and brews them up in no time. So we covered several ways of making an oil infusion. Another tip and trick is I usually always recommend, there's always exceptions to rules, however, we'll go with the rule today. Dry your herb out before you infuse it into an oil. Think of it this way: water and oil don't mix, and a fresh plant has moisture in it, which is water. And if you take that wet plant, that fresh, wet, newly cut plant, and put it into your jar and fill it with oil, that oil is not going to be able to penetrate that herb and to draw that medicine out and simultaneously preserve that herb, because it can't get through. The water is repelling it. They don't mix. So dry your herbs out in the summer. If you have seasonal years like we do here, it is hot. If it's really humid in your area, you might want to bring it in somewhere drafty in your home and even run fans on it while it's drying. You can use a dehydrator. If you've seen me use those giant Herbal drying towers that are basically netted shelves that hang, those work great, especially again if it's dry air and humidity and not much humidity this time of year, or at least putting fans on it. It only takes a matter of hours really to dry out your herbs, depending on what method you use there. So it is worth that to keep your oil from going rancid. That would be such a shame to spend all this time growing, cultivating, or harvesting, hiking, gathering this herb, and then it all goes to waste. Quick side note, you can use fresh herb when making tinctures. So if you don't have time or don't want to wait, you can take that fresh herb and put it in and cover it with alcohol, and that ethanol will cut into your wet plant, it doesn't matter, and preserve it and drop the medicinal properties as well. However, that is for internal use, so think about that. Would I like to make an oil infusion for ideally external use, or a tincture for internal use? There's pros and cons to both, and both are needed in an herbalist's home. Also, before you prep any remedy at home, you want to use a sterilized glass jar. For infusions, I'll use clear glass, but once it's done infusing, I will transfer it to amber colored glass for longevity. If it's sterilized first and using amber, your oils can keep for several years. And sterilizing jars is super easy. One most popular method is to submerge, I never get that right, your jar into a boiling water for 10 minutes. Take it out and dry it under the sun, in a sunny window. and then that will be sterilized. Another way is, like, for example, we have a Kangen water machine. You know what that is? Well, you can make acidic water 2.5 and it will sterilize your jars just by running it through the machine at that rate and rinsing your jars in that. That saves time and money since you're not really using like the stove to boil anything. It is awesome. So think about that. Sterilize your jars no matter how you do it, do it. And then I thought after we make our infusions that we could make a salve together or a balm out of our St. John's wort, so I can kind of guide you from literally picking it like I showed you earlier to bringing it into the home, what it looks like, how to start your oil infusion so you can craft it later into soap, lotion, balm, salves, creams, ointments. It always starts with an infused oil first. And since I have infusions from last year, because I was thinking ahead, I can fast forward this into time, so to speak, and show you how to make those balms too. While we're on the topic of salves and balms, let me give you the recipe. This is universal and it's in proportions. You would take 4 parts of your oil, infused oil, to 1 part of beeswax to make a balm. That's it. 4 to 1, meaning whatever size of container measurement cup you use the same for the 1 part. So this is really big. But anyway, say you used 4 of these, you filled this up 4 times of your infused oil, then it would be 1 of this for beeswax, 4 to 1 ratio. Now to make a salve, it's the same ratios. 4 parts of your infused oil to 1 part of your beeswax. Make sure it's natural beeswax. But you're gonna add 1 more part of a butter, mango butter, shea butter, coconut butter, oil, something rich and creamy and fat. That makes a salve, and that's the difference. And I remember this between a balm and a salve is a softy salve, because a salve has that additional part of fat or a butter in it that makes it a little bit more creamy and luscious. Now, why would you go for a balm versus a salve? Well, that's application. Do you want something that's a little bit firmer that will glide on but stay put right where it's at? Or do you want something a little more luscious, thick, and creamy that'll cover more surface area? Think about that first. It's the same ingredients, the same medicinal delivery, but different application. All right, so let's take a look at the difference between dried. So here's our dried St. John's wort. This was from a while ago and it's been hanging up to dry. I just cut it about above the root. So I do have stems, so I can tie them up in large bundles and hang them up. And that is my favorite way to dry them, is just air drying them. This is fresh St. John's wort that we just picked today. So you can see the difference. Both hold medicinal qualities in them. St. John's wort is found places that are dry, good irrigation, almost like cracked soil. It loves ditches, along gravel roads, though I wouldn't necessarily harvest along the roadside, especially gravel, because it gets dusty. And ideally, you don't want to wash your flowers because the pollen often is also medicinal. So try to forage where you're not getting lots of emissions, where you're not getting runoff from, from fields with possible pesticides in it. Try to think about where you're foraging your St. John's wort. The parts that we are after are the blossoms. So it is nice to harvest when they're opened up and when they're bright and yellow, and the leaves. Now the stem we don't necessarily need. So I often with the dried will cut it about here. So right where you see most of the leaves, or I'm sorry, where you see most of the flowers here, I kind of cut it right where those start. And then I'll use the bits of stems that are up there in the infusions because they won't harm anything. So to save time, I'm not going to hand pick off all of these little flowers and all the leaves. It's okay to leave some stems in there during your infusion. They're not poisonous. Like some plants, you want to be more careful of that than others. This one, it's okay to put it in there. The whole plant will infuse and it's all good for you. This is a pretty woody, dry herb too, so it won't take long to dry out. It doesn't have to get like necessarily this dry. This is super dry. But a few days, some places even a day or a half a day, it would be dried out and enough moisture gone and wilted out enough to be used. So here you can see some that has been dried out not as long. This is my favorite. This is probably my favorite look of it to use. And here we're gonna, I love using recycled pickle jars for infusions for at home use or to hold dried herbs. But I have a little jar here of that will infuse. And then I'm gonna infuse this big jar too, which has me thinking about carrier oils. When I talk about that, it is important that you get a good quality oil, again, that has medicinal properties in and of itself for your skin to also reap those properties. So the oil is important on what you pick, and we all have our preferences. And it also depends what you're wanting to treat, what your goal is on what type of oil you would possibly match with. Some of my most favorite oils is a single source extra virgin olive oil or a jojoba oil. I also love castor oil. Those are all great oils to pick from. There's several more out there. Macadamia nut oil, avocado oil, sweet almond oil. That's like great for your hair. So any infusions for hair, I would use sweet almond oil. The list goes on. The main thing you want to note is just make sure it's a good quality carrier oil. Today I'm going to infuse it into extra virgin olive oil. That I like the consistency to make balms and salves from. I'll probably take it further and make it into our soaps, and I love whipping it into our whipped tallow to just bump up the healing properties that the tallow already possesses. So I find olive oil just super versatile, not only for our family, but people across the board. It's a little bit more cost effective, even a nice quality olive oil than castor oil at times. That castor oil is usually my second go-to, but it is super thick and can be a little trickier to infuse and trickier to work with. It's just gloopier, but it is a wonder oil, the palm of God, you know? So anyways, pick your oil, go grab it, and let's get this going. So we're going to infuse an oil first, so let's go ahead and put this oil that's already infused to the side. We'll use that later. Now I'm just going to take this dried St. John's wort that I already have that we foraged last year and clip it off the flower areas like I was telling you. I'm just going to clip it off into a bowl. And again, you can try to avoid the stems, but if you get some stems in there, which you will, it's a stemmy herb, that is again okay for that to happen. But we really want to try to focus most of the infusion on the flowers and leaves itself. And here, I'm almost done with this one, and then I just like to leave the stems tied up like I had them, so it makes for a little bit easier cleanup. You'll find that when you go to cut these apart, sometimes they will go flying. That's just part of it. We'll sweep it up when we're done. All right, this looks pretty good. See, I took off most of the flowers. Here's my bundle of stems still, and I'll just set that to the side. And now I'm just gonna continue to clip down my bundles here. There may be other methods to speed this process up. We're a small farm that crafts everything from our hands, so this is just what works for us and how we've been doing it for several years now. It is a time-consuming process, but worth it. This time of year, when we're foraging, we go out almost every day and collect and gather and keep eyes on our favorite spots. And that way we can take just what we need when we need it and leave the rest, especially when things bloom daily right now. We just like to take little bits every day here and there, gather, and then once I have a lot built up, then we'll go through and process it. Usually I reserve like a whole day to do that, and I'll have several things that I need to get and process and kind of just hunker down and get to it and get things cut and clipped and into jars, and I have all my oils out. And I've usually made sure I bought a bulk amount, which again, with our skincare company, we are at that place where most of the time we have a bulk amount of oil laying around already. And I get my label gun out and just make a day of it. And then that way it's all done, and then I can focus on the next herb. Usually I only forage one herb at a time during the season and focus on it. Then once I feel like we have enough for the year, for the family and the business, then I'll move on to focusing on another herb that's in season for the year. And then we'll repeat the process all over again. Again, I harvest or forage for the herb, I dry the herb, and then I infuse the herb. That infusion then gets turned into lotion, salves, balms, creams, deodorants, shampoos, soaps, everything. It all starts with this process here. I have my St. John's wort all trimmed down here with as few stems as I can get without fussing. I don't have time to fuss so much. And again, the stems are okay anyways. We just don't want it to take up too much room in the jar. That's the only reason we kind of don't want the stems, because for every stem there is less amount of room in the jar for the good stuff of the leaves and the flowers. All right, I already sterilized my jars before I turned on the cameras here and got us all set up. So I'm going to get this jar stuffed with herb, and you can look up different recipes that'll tell you exactly how much that needs to go in here. I am a visual person. I also operate on feel, and how I was taught was visual. I roughly do about 3/4 of a jar of herb, half to 3/4, and the rest all the way to the top of oil. That's usually how I go. If you want exact measurements, you can definitely look that up and find out like what's your ratio between St. John's wort and oil. I'm sure there's some resources out there. We operate kind of in a folk medicine basis, Christian folk medicine to be exact, which is a lot of eyeballing and feel and know-how of what these should be, look like, and how they should go. So, stuffing that jar down, I kind of pack it in somewhat firmly, and I'll show you what this looks like in a minute up close. I'll bring it up to the camera so you can see more. I'm just working on getting it down in there. I think I'll have enough to do 2 jars here, which I will do. All right. And then I'll show you the difference too between like a cut and sifted St. John's wort that I did and St. John's wort that looks more like this, stemmy with the actual flowers on. Here's my other jar. I'm gonna go ahead and finish filling up with my other St. John's wort. Now, if I'm just about out of herb, I will go ahead and add the rest of it to it. Even if my jars are about where I want it, I'll just go ahead and push it and put more in. So I don't have to start, I'm not gonna start a jar with like nothing here, so. All right. Let's get that out of the way. All right, let's take a look at what these look like before we fill them up with oil. All right, there is what that is gonna look like. There are some stems, again, that's okay. Lots of blossoms, lots of leaves. Here's your other little one. This one will be for my family here, and this one will probably be used later for your soap and for your tallow. And then I'll show you while I'm up here what cut and sifted looks like. So this, often is like a cheaper way. It's like a way to stretch that St. John's wort, because if you notice, there's a lot of stem cut into there, not as much flower, a lot of stem, lots of leaf. And if you notice here, lots more flower. See? But all right, so let's get these filled up with oil. And it's super simple. You just get your oil of choice and fill it up to the top. The first several days when I'm making an oil infusion, I will pick these up and shake them and rotate them and make sure all the oil is in your plant, on your plant, over your plant. If these are dried right and your jar is sterilized, you're good to go. Outside of, if you have any plant matter that pops up out of this oil, you could run the risk of it getting rancid. So even though it's been dried, you're pretty much in the clear, but try to make sure all of your plant matter is covered. And like I said, one way I do that, especially at first when it's still dry and trying to absorb that oil, is for those first few days, I'll pick it up and shake it and make sure it's getting really saturated and all that medicinal property is getting pulled out. After several days, I don't shake them as much. I still will to agitate them and kind of encourage that process, but I won't as much because it won't float to the top as much. Everything's kind of fully saturated and weighted down. So then I go, every couple days or when I'm thinking of it, then I'll shake, give it a good shake, turn it upside down, let it sit upside down for a day, things like that. All right, so there's one, and I'll pour this one up closer so you can see. So here's my pickle jar one. This is our Kirkland's single source extra virgin olive oil. That is a great brand from Costco. You can also get it online. It is about the best brand of olive oil you can get for like a home herbalist. Something that's pretty easy to source and fairly affordable. All right, now I need to find a little lid for that. But how beautiful are these? So now these, I'm gonna get my little label maker out and I'm gonna label it because I always think I'll remember, but I don't. I'll forget when I started it. I'll forget what it is. I can often usually by now tell by looking at it. But I use a little Dymo label maker that's literally like 20 bucks on like Amazon, and it's on our store, in our storefront too on Amazon. A lot of these products that I use are on our storefront, so check that out if you're curious about the glass or funnels or various things like that. But it's a super basic little label maker and I use it all the time, and it's just a great affordable tool to have for your apothecary and for labeling things. All right, gonna lid this up here and set these to the side. All right, so this is the little guy I was talking about, super simple. I'm just gonna type in St. John's wort oil. And I'll also write in about the date that it needs to be pulled, not the date that I made it, but the date it's ready to be taken out and used. That for me is more beneficial than the day I made it, because if I have the day I made it, I still have to look at the calendar anyway, so I might as well just do it now. So that's what I'm going to enter in next, which I think will be July 11th-ish. So it just prints out the side like this, and it trims off, and then I'm just gonna stick it on the jar. We'll set those to the side and then get our salve. Well, today I think we're gonna make a balm. We'll get our St. John's wort balm made. All right. Here is one label. Oh, I better do it. There, not so bad. And I'm gonna make one for this little guy too. Now, we're going to move on to making our balm, our St. John's Wort Healing Skin Balm. So here is an infused oil. This is about a year old. And we're going to strain it into this sterilized glass jar and let it sit for a while upside down to make sure all the oil gets in here. Then we're gonna add 4 parts of this oil, however much that makes, and we're gonna add 1 part of that beeswax to this jar and then put it over a double broiler and gently melt it down together and then pour it off into tins, and that is it. So after your 4 to 6 weeks, you will have an infused oil, and then you're like, what do I do with it? You can just put it into amber dropper bottles and use the oil as is. That provides a really deep, penetrating remedy. I love oils infused by themselves. I love the application, how they go on. You can even just drip it onto your face and use it that way. Again though, we're gonna make a balm today so we can have practice doing that together from this. So often, sometimes I'll even split this. I'll make a little bit of oil, you know, reserve that to the side in my amber dropper bottles, and then make some balm with it as well. So I just split the batch. So we start off, everyone loves my little my funnels, and since we run a little dairy farm, I first initially had a bunch of these stainless steel funnels that I would pull from the dairy side into the apothecary to reserve 1 or 2 for the apothecary side, because they are stainless, they're easy to clean and sterilize, they're heat resistant, though hot to the touch, but they can handle heat. And then they also come with these awesome little inserts that are, why can't I think of the word right now? Strainers. And it just kind of goes down into the hole here, which makes it extra awesome for straining off your infused oil. So I just stuck that in there and put it in the jar here. I'm just gonna turn this infused oil out into this funnel and let it have some time running off into this jar here. It's such a beautiful process to watch. It smells so lovely. I love straining off infused oil so much. And this just takes patience, and sometimes I'll take a clean finger or a spoon and gently just stir it in the funnel to kind of speed process up and keep those herbs moving and not clogging the filter, or the strainer, I should say. So I do this until I get to a certain point, and then what I'll do is just precariously balance the jar upside down in the funnel and let it be a while, and then come back and check on it after just time has taken place and gravity, and it's just naturally every last bit has drained into our new sterile jar to make our balm. Okay, so we're at that point where I'm just going to dump it in, see, and I just balance it right, make sure the kids don't come running through the kitchen while I'm doing this, and I'll come check on it in a minute where every last bit of oil has drained out. And don't forget, just like a watched pot never boils, a strained oil never strains being watched. All right, I think the best thing to do is while this is straining, I'm gonna just gently slide it to the side, oops, see, and let it do its thing and get our cooktop ready and our water boiling so it is ready to rock and roll by the time that is done straining. So let's go ahead and get that out. You can make these infusions on your stovetop. I love an induction burner, you know, like a little Bunsen burner, so much because, like, for example, say one of my daughters needed to make dinner, I could be working here and leaving the stove open. Or during the summertime, those induction burners that I'm about to get out saves on the heat and doesn't heat up the kitchen like our stove tends to. And it also boils the water and melts things down quicker than our old stove does. So there's several reasons I like using and recommend an induction cooktop. as well as that is also in our Amazon storefront, the Wild Carrot Farmstead. So go check that out. Again, all these things are usually linked there, all nice and in categories for you. All right, here it is. It's actually pretty good size. And I will set it, I think right here will be good for y'all to see. Let's get it plugged in. And I'll be right back with a pot of water. All right, this pot of water is just going to go on my cooktop, and it is going to get to a low boil. And then I will take my jar that will have the already infused St. John's wort oil in it, put it in here, the jar and all, with some beeswax. Again, 4:1 is your ratio, and melt it down, and then we're just gonna pour it off into containers, and that's it. You've made your first balm, or maybe your 100th balm. So here, I'm just gonna turn it on. And set it so it gets to boiling. Looks like it's been about 30 minutes to an hour. Looks like most of our oil is strained out. So I'm gonna take this off of here like this and set it to the side. And now we're gonna work with our oil here. So this is a 1/2 gallon jar. This looks like we have about a quart, maybe a little bit more of oil. And I'm going to set it down into this water. This is your double broiler technique that we often use for various things, like I mentioned, to even do your infusion in. But again, I must remind you, this has already been infused. We're not infusing anymore. We fast forwarded 4 to 6 weeks at least for pretend, and here we are. Now, there's our 4 parts of St. John's wort extra virgin olive oil. We're going to infuse 1 part of beeswax. This is beeswax from the hive. This is what it looks like. We poured it into molds. You can also use beeswax pellets. Again, it's really important you make sure that whatever wax you use, that's 100% beeswax. This beeswax will go, and we're just going to melt that in there. I will be stirring it and watching it and making sure everything incorporates. If you were going to make this a salve, you could do everything exactly the same, but add 1 part of butter right now. All right, now I'm just gonna give it a stir, take a look at it, maybe turn up my heat a little bit. All right, now we wait again. Watch it and stir, watch it and stir, and we'll be back right in a minute once everything is melted down. I was thinking while this is melting down, let's go take this fresh St. John's wort and put it in our herb towers. Come on. All right, here's one of our towers. She's getting kind of full. Here's one down here that's open. I'm just gonna put the St. John's wort right in there, like so, and spread it out real nice so it has time to dry and there's plenty of airflow. And I love how they zip up so then nothing can get into it and they're safe. Wind won't blow it away. And now I'll just let that fresh stuff sit and dry before we repeat this process all over again. All right, now that we're back from getting that put up and dried, I'm gonna check it and stir it. Everything seems to be melting down nicely. It looks like it's gonna have another probably 10 minutes on here, so let's go ahead and stick around kind of closely, but we can step away a minute. While we wait for that to finish up, I'm gonna go ahead and clean up our area and get the little tins out that we'll be pouring this off into. So the stems, for this, we're gonna go ahead and compost these. All right, give it another quick stir, and then I'm gonna gather up the dishes that are out and put the jars up on the apothecary real quick of the infusions that we've already made. Get this. All right, we have our tins. I like to use 2-ounce metal screw top tins for balms and salves. That tends to be what I go for. I love them. We get most of our containers from Berlin Packaging or Uline. We love both of them. And I also like to line up and get our balm containers ready to pour for when that time comes. I can quickly do it and be done for the day. Give this another stir real quick. We still got some time. That natural beeswax takes a while to melt down. I also don't like doing it under too much heat because we don't want to cook out all the medicinal properties of this either. All right, I bet it's more than melted down by now. It sure is. So at this point, when both things are fully melted, give it a good stir, and you can take it off the heat and let it cool a bit if you want. If you decide that putting some essential oils in here is best for you, some skin soothing, skin promoting essential oils like cedarwood, orange, tea tree would be good in here, rosemary. You can do that, but I would suggest letting this infusion cool a bit, because if it's too hot, you'll basically cook off the essential oils you put in there. So put the essential oils in, if you're going to, at the end right before you pour, once everything's a bit cooled off. For me, the top of these jars, which is pretty cool, are usually never hot, but be careful. Use something if you need to. This isn't hot on top. And I'm gonna just pull it out here, and I'm gonna get rid of this cooktop, and we'll get ready to pour. This is a little tricky for me to pour. Sometimes I will, or you can pour this into a little pour spout if you want to, before you pour it into your container. I'm going to turn this off and unplug it since we're done. And here we go. So pretty. This brownish red between the oil and the beeswax is so beautiful. Oops. It smells very earthy, a little bit like tea almost. I'm going to go grab a couple more balm containers. Oh, I really like to let these cool down before I put the lid on it. The lid kind of inhibits the cooling process. So put these somewhere secure before you pour them, so you can have plenty of times to let them set up here. Oh, looks like I might need one more container here. I'll be right back for that. Alrighty, one left I think here. Or will we have two left? No, I'll just top off some more of these. That looks good. That is it. We made a St. John's wort balm. I'm just gonna allow these to set up and go put lids on it when I get back from the garden here in a minute. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. Thank you for coming along and foraging with us all the way from beginning to end and learning all about St. John's wort. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, where we make daily postings and teachings about herbalism and small farm life. See you later.